Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone got their lunch and are refueled now. My name is Burton Woodhull, first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Jason Gates from GetFused to come and speak to us in our next competitive advantage session on how to develop iterative learning and growth in an event-based business model. This CA will run for about 30 minutes, at which point he may take a few questions, but with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jason. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So a couple of things to kind of go through here. One of the things that I find very interesting when I'm dealing with analytics, especially in sports, because it's so high pressure, fast paces, it usually starts with aha. You have an idea, and you want to bring that idea to life. So you start talking with folks inside your organization. You're trying to sell that idea. It finally gets to a point where you say, hey, we can actually do this. You start putting everything in place. You get to a point where you have all this these metrics and analytics that you're storing, and because it's an event-based business model where your event maybe happens once a week or maybe once a month, at the end of all that hard work, you get this. Yeah, it's a dot. Let me magnify it. There we go. And what our business model or our data model is basically trying to do is turn these one data points that you're getting once a month into something that looks a little bit more traditional. So, how do you develop this business model or this data model? So basically what we start taking a look at is identifying a dependable baseline. So a lot of the times we will take something kind of predictable. A lot of websites, for example, have, of course, their www main web presence. But in a lot of cases, there's many, many sub-sites. Like there might be a bar's website for consuming content in a sports bar. There might be a shop site so that you can go and buy merchandise. But a lot of this really depends on the event, and the information about the main core event is on the www site. So we will typically take a look at that site as the baseline. We want to develop a method of kind of looking at data kind of in the past. So a lot of the times, and we're going to kind of get into this in the next slides, where it's about collecting that data and making sure that you basically pull anything that's not nailed down. And then finally put that knowledge to use. Don't be shy. Go ahead and use that data. So there's a lot there. But I'm going to go through each one of these 4 tiers. But ultimately, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to collect, you're trying to organize, you're trying to process, and then ultimately store all of this data. So I know you guys are looking at this, but we're going to go through each one of these layers in the next 4 slides. So first, data collection. Again, grab anything that's not nailed down. Make a pile. Don't be shy about it. And it could be anything like RSS feeds. It could be weather data. It could be stuff from social media channels, analytics. Doesn't matter. Just grab it, store it away. Next area here, we're looking at organizing that data. So basically, the big point here is basically normalizing it. We're prepping it for storage. We're converting the data types because everybody's got a different way of communicating. We basically want to normalize that data. Next, we start getting into processing. Think of this like a giant conveyor belt for data. Basically, you're looking at tick counts. Anytime you get a positive hit on something, let's say it's text analysis where it says, hey, there was a demand for something, or the language indicated that a user wanted something, or maybe it's just something as simple as a website hit. We want to basically up those tick counts. Geolocation is another big thing that we pay a lot of attention to, and I've got some examples towards the end of this presentation that we'll go over to kind of show you how we've been able to at least put this data to use in real life. And then finally, storage. And this is kind of where we've got 2 branches that kind of separate things out. The first one is that reporting database. Now the goal here is to basically make it so that you have a fast experience for folks that need to get that data quickly. And then the other side of it is the long-term storage. And this is kind of key, where you're basically taking all that raw data at the beginning phases of this, and you're basically stuffing it into that database. Now, as time goes on, and where you want to start learning from your data and looking at past events, you can at any time, at least with the way that we've set this up, delete your reporting database, refeed all that long-term storage right back into your conveyor belt, and basically reprocess that data and relearn or learn in a more meaningful way whatever you were trying to prove. So, great, what do you do with it? So I've got 4 examples of things that we're gonna kind of go over and show how we've been able to use this. And we're gonna talk a little bit about real-time effectiveness monitoring. We're gonna talk about potential sales opportunities that you can get with this. We're gonna talk about targeted sales opportunities. And then finally, we're gonna talk about focusing marketing spend. Now, we've had the distinct pleasure of working with a lot of sporting enterprises over the years. This is our 20th year in business. We're right here in Boston. Everybody from like the Patriots to the UFC to Revolution Soccer, Major League Lacrosse. We've seen a lot of different twists and turns in the data. So I want to kind of go through some of those with you guys now. So the first one up here, we're going to do real-time social data with live TV scheduling for kind of like an effectiveness monitor. So think of it this way. You have an announcer that's going to be saying, what's going on, a commentator within that sporting event. But throughout the commentation, you're going to have points where they're going to be plugging either the next event, or maybe it's an advertiser or something along those lines. How do you know whether or not that was successful? And what we will do is we'll actually track how well people are chatting about that particular thing. So let's say it was a hashtag and it was an event that you were trying to push. You basically can see how much chatter there is in there, and then 5 minutes later, if you didn't get the result that you were looking for, maybe something happened on the telecast that kind of overshadowed the announcer, you can kind of get to the point where you say, all right, well, we need to hit that messaging again. So you can do that. Or you continue with whatever else you had kind of in your A/B chart for your live presentation. Let's see here. So now, another one here is just finding sales opportunities. So a good example here is the UFC. And they have an entire arm of their company which basically sells commercial pay-per-views to sports bars. You can go to the website and find an establishment in your area and go and watch and enjoy with your friends. One of the things that we've been able to do is take a look and see, from an analytics standpoint, what the usage on the website is, and then we tag that with the amount of, we tag all that data from a geo-targeted standpoint, and then we compare that to basically a geo-lookup kind of analysis. And the end result is basically a pile of activated users where there are no bars to be watching this content, which is a problem. So what we've basically been able to do is create a sales opportunity, because now that sales team can take this list of cities and say, hey, I have a pile of people here that want to see this content. Why don't you buy this license? So now diving into this a little bit more, they have a lot of free content that you can watch as well. It's not just the pay-per-views for them. And in this case, what we've been able to do is take a licensing, the licensing that they have, because we know who purchases everything or purchases the content to watch on those pay-per-views. So now we can basically take a look and see on those live events, when we look at the social data, how many people are tweeting about the free event from different establishments. The way we do that is we basically get the geographic data, in this case it's longitude and latitude, out of these social networks, and we basically create these little clusters. And they're clusters in about 50-foot radius. We take those clusters, take a look at some mapping technology, and find the list of establishments that are actually getting a lot of traffic in their facility because of this content. We then have a list of a very targeted group of folks that we know, or establishments that we know will benefit from having the pay-per-view in their venue. So, the last one that I'm going to talk about here is basically focusing marketing dollars. One of the interesting things that you can do with fan chatter on social channels is basically, again, kind of tag them into different regions. Now, every sporting organization will look at marketing in a different way. Some of these folks are going to be looking at regional kind of markets, so it might be a sports team that's based out of a city. It could be something that's more global, like the UFC, where they basically are going to cater to a bunch of markets. But ultimately what you can do is, as you're approaching that event, you can start to look at that fan chatter and kind of slice it up in different ways to see how much chatter is happening in a different region. And if that region is underperforming in generating the chatter that you want, you can basically hit them with a little bit more advertising or marketing or press, and basically start pushing towards the result that you want. You know, it was a lot harder when you didn't have these technologies, which are so great in the past, where you would essentially just have to yell louder or blink it more. And you're spending a tremendous amount of money doing this either locally or nationally or even globally in some of these sporting organizations. So with that said, I do have some time to take some questions if anybody has any. All right, so then I've either thoroughly confused you all. Okay then. Well, I'll be down here or outside if anybody has any. Oh, I'm sorry. The lights do bother me. Or.
How much do you have to know what you want before you start working with someone like yourself? When you say this is how it goes, do you work with someone to offer different choices they might decide to do? And how much do you have to know before you can engage?
Absolutely, that's a good question. So basically what we're trying to, the question is, how much do you need to know in order to kind of engage? And a lot of this really just depends on that idea, that initial idea that folks have. A lot of times when you're dealing with any type of data project, doesn't have to be sports, it could be virtually any field, it starts with a question. And that's what data should be able to answer. It should answer questions. So if you have a question about how are people consuming my content, what is the enjoyment level? I mean, it could even just be, are they out of stock of a particular beverage in a region? You can actually detect this stuff if the chatter has a critical mass of data that you can actually use. Go ahead. Now, you mean retail in the sense of an actual brick and mortar store?
Or e-commerce. If it's like an event for a apparel brand, let's say, and then they want to track how that leads to purchasing, either during the event or after the event. Is that a possible thing to do?
Absolutely. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of do this. In a sense, you take a look at different matchups, or even, let's say, the UFC, for example. They go into different cities whenever they perform an event. I mean, just going into a city and saying, hey, what level of traffic came in, how much chatter was there, and then trying to determine, in venue, there may be a way to determine monetary gains from that perspective. Of course, you have, within any organization, you're going to have your e-commerce that you can track with just normal analytics. And then over time, you can measure that stuff, potentially going forward. But a lot of times you can measure it going backwards. That's why I was saying, hey, don't be shy about collecting the data that you have. For example, the whole measurement of announcement stuff. You can have that idea, kind of going back to her question there, and basically say, all right, well, I have this idea. I want to figure out, how to measure this. You can actually go to historical data, because, just about every sporting organization is going to have everything basically time-coded and metatized for every single second of content that's created. So whenever that push for an event or whenever that push for an advertisement takes place, you can go back historically and take a look at the data that was there. And if you've collected it, great. If you can retrieve it, if you didn't, great. But yes, there's ways you can kind of measure any of them. If you have a specific one later on, I'd be happy to talk about it. All right. Thank you very much.